Do you need another one?
It is 10:05. We're going to call the Reinvestment Zone Number 2 TIRZ meeting to order.
Is your mic on, sir?
It's on. Okay. Ms. Huerta, could you please call the roll?
Chairman Greg Smith.
Here.
Board members Roland Barrera.
Here.
Barbara Canales.
Present.
Brent Chesney is absent. Paulette Guajardo.
Present.
Gil Hernandez.
Here.
Michael Hunter.
Here.
Billy Lerma. Here. John Martinez. Sir Martinez has stepped away. Ben Molina.
Present.
Jim Needham.
Here.
Sylvia Tryon Oliver. Miss Oliver.
Here.
Okay, great. Mike Pesley. Lori Turner.
Here.
Okay, we do have a quorum present to conduct the meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Huerta. On their next item of business is public comment. Is there any comment from the public?
You did receive one written comment that was provided from Mr. Jay Gardner. Other than that, no other comment.
Okay. Okay, thank you. And I'd like to welcome Dr. Lori Turner from Del Mar. Welcome aboard, Lori. So she doesn't quite live in the TIRZ, but pretty close to it. Very much a coastal person.
Thank you.
Next item of business is the minutes of July 21st, 2020. Any comment? I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
We have a motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Next is our financial report. Ms. Cooley.
Good morning, Chairman and Board. Next slide, please. So the financial reports for the time period ending January 31st. So the TIRZ began the year with a fund balance of about 1.7 million, almost 1.8 million. To date, we have received 3.5 million of the 4.8 million that has been budgeted, and this is primarily property taxes. Even though we are below budget, we're running about on the same collection percentage as we did in the prior fiscal year. A lot of times people pay right at the end of January, and so we receive those collections into February when the tax assessor actually posts those to the account. So I'm not concerned that we're running about the same percentage. Our expenditures to date, we have our debt payments are due in March and September, so you will see those expense in the March timeframe. Administrative services have a portion of the year, so that leaves us with an ending fund balance of 5.2 million. Of that fund balance, we have about $2 million that is reserved for our bond reserve and for our maintenance reserve. Next slide, please. So there is also additional 14.5 million that is in our CIP projects, and these are the projects where the funds are sitting. We do have 5.6 million for the Park Road 22 bridge, and then we have the remainder that is sitting in different Packery Channel projects. That does conclude my presentation. I'm available for any questions.
Do we have any questions? Now, in the hinterland?
Just one question. Historically, has the TIRZ ever funded anything for coastal parks? Like maybe Councilman Pusley could help here as well. Do you recall that? You know, like I'm just thinking about Packery Channel, that great park right there by the Sea Life Center. And
Not that I remember.
Yeah, I'm not sure, and we'd have to look to see if that's in the project and
I wonder
finance
if it's
plan.
eligible.
Yeah.
That was where I was headed, if you don't mind.
Sure, we can double check that. Yeah, because it would be, just to refresh someone's memory, to spend money from a TIRZ has to be included in the project and financing plan. And so I will double check to see what is allowable within that plan.
Thank you so much.
And Judge Canales, it has to be within the boundary of the TIRZ. I don't believe they are, but it's something we definitely need to check. Being involved on the boards before on council, to my knowledge, which is fairly extent, there's been no expenditures in those two areas.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about that 83 acres that really is adjacent to Packery Channel. Maybe it's
Yeah.
not 83, 63. It's that Packery Channel, that beautiful wetlands area. It really flows right into Packery Channel. I just wondered if that was eligible for any small opportunities.
Well, if you can get back with Judge
Okay.
Canales and
Thank you.
check on the map.
Sure.
Thank you. Member Pusley?
Yes, Heather, I didn't quite understand on your second page, or page 3 of the report, where you have Packery Channel listed. So are the items Hurricane Harvey repair, dredging, monitoring, restoration, those are all expenditure items associated with Packery, is that correct?
Those are all available budgets. So the amounts that are listed on here are what is
That's what I meant, that
funded, yes.
they're budgeted for Packery Channel specifically.
Yes, specifically.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood
Sure.
that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Hearing none, we'll go to our next agenda item, which is the election of officers. Per the bylaws, the board may elect one of its members to serve as vice chair on there. I'll open the floor to nominations for vice chair. I'd like to nominate Board Member Pusley.
Second.
No second on nominations, but is required. So is that the only
Okay,
nomination?
all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Next item of business is the item 4, the tax increment reinvestment zone number 2 calendar.
Good morning, Chairman, board members. We do propose meeting in June and meeting in July for calendar year 2021. Again, if any agenda items increase or the need arises to call additional meetings, meetings will be scheduled accordingly. That completes my presentation.
Do I, any questions for staff? Okay. Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the calendar.
Second.
We have a motion second, all in favor? Aye. Okay. Next item of business is the briefing on tax increment reinvestment zone number 2.
Can we have that presentation up, please? Thank you. So I had talked to Councilman Smith earlier this month, and he had some great questions about the TIRZ 2 expiration, but he wanted to bring it for the board. We do have new members, so with that said, next slide, please. So the TIRZ 2 was created in 2000, used for infrastructure projects on the island, primarily at or near the Packery Channel. That TIRZ 2 is currently set to expire on December 31, 2022. Next slide, please. So in Section 311 of the Texas Tax Code, it explains how a reinvestment zone terminates, as well as extending the term of a zone or portion of a zone. So you can designate an ordinance to terminate the zone early if you like, or the date on which all project costs, tax increment bonds, and interest on these bonds, or other any obligations have been paid in full. Now, Section 311 also allows the city to extend the term of all or portion of the zone after notice and hearing in the manner provided for the designation of the zone. No other taxing entity is required to participate in the extended term of the zone unless it enters into an agreement to do so. The next few slides, I'll be able to explain that more. And also, extension of term requires pending project costs or other obligations. We will need to make sure that there are projects planned that require funding past the December 31, 2022 deadline. Next slide, please. So here we go. The financing plan would need to be updated. Staff did identify 7 steps to updating this. Now, 2 out of those 7 have been done or have been completed, which one was the economic feasibility study, as well as the estimated captured appraisal value to include the extended duration. Now, as you see, number 3 is talking about anticipated bonds. At this time, we don't anticipate additional bonds. Number 2, lists of planned projects, public works, and estimated project costs to include new projects. Number 4 would be contact taxing entities about continued or renewed participation in the TIRZ and enter into new agreements, as well as the amount of increment each entity agrees to contribute to the fund. And lastly, update the duration of the zone for an additional time period up to 20 years. Next slide, please. The other thing we'd have to do is update the project plan. Now, this isn't as extensive as a few minor changes. So you would have a description and map showing existing uses and conditions of real property within the zone and proposed uses of that property. Also proposed changes to zoning ordinances, the master plan of the city, building codes or other municipal ordinances or subdivision rules and regulations of the county. A list of estimated non-project costs, and a statement of the method for relocating persons who will be displaced, if any, as a result of implementation of the plan. Next slide, please. So here will be the procedure that we mentioned earlier in the slides. So talking about the preliminary financing plan, update our current plan as needed, publish notice of hearing on creation or extension of the TIRZ, hold that public hearing, designate the TIRZ by ordinance, and create the board of directors, and then board prepares finalized project and financing plan for council approval. That concludes my presentation. I stand by for any questions.
Any questions? Board Member Hernandez?
Yes, thank you. And this goes to a comment I made at City Council a while back about once you create something, it never goes away. But with regards to this, in Chapter 311, it talks about what eligibility is for a reinvestment zone. And it's basically under Section 311.005, criteria for a reinvestment zone. It talks about various things that are associated with it. A substantial number of substandard slum or deteriorating structures, a predominance of defective or inadequate sidewalks or layout, or street layout, faulty lot layout, or in relation to size, adequacy, accessibility, usefulness, unsanitary or unsafe conditions, deterioration of site or other improvements, tax or special assessment delinquency exceeds the fair value of the land, defective or unusual conditions of title, conditions that endanger life or property or by fire or other causes, structures other than single-family residential structures, less than 10% of square footage. It goes on for a few other items, but it's basically for dilapidated areas. How is this justified this for TIRZ here on the island?
The island TIRZ was originally justified as undeveloped area. That was how it was justified when we created it, because it had not been undeveloped or underdeveloped area, which is eligible for a TIRZ creation.
So, I'm curious as to what is undeveloped. What do you define as undeveloped?
At the time, there was very little development out there when we were creating the Packard Channel, so that was what was justified.
It's understandable that was 20 years ago. I understand back 20 years ago it might have been part of that, but I mean, are we looking forward, going forward from 2022 on? Are we doing this in the spirit of what TIRZ was supposed to be, or what it's supposed to be for? Now, I understand you have to keep it going until you pay off all your debt for the existing projects, and I don't have any issues with that. But going forward, is this something that we just need to be bringing back into the city and pay through the general fund for some of these projects? Or do we continue to have TIRZ going forward, even though it doesn't necessarily meet the spirit of the law?
That would ultimately be the decision that council would need to make if they want to extend it or not. The law allows you to extend it as long as there are still projects to help improve development in the area.
I'm sorry, I can barely understand.
Sorry, the law allows you to extend the term of the TIRZ as long as there are still eligible projects that are being done to increase development in the area. The decision on whether or not to do it, that is ultimately a council decision that you guys will be making at a council meeting if you would like to proceed with the extension of the
Okay.
TIRZ or not.
Based on the section, what you're talking about, changing the boundaries or the term of the existing zone, 311.007, it's subject to the limitations provided for within the previous section. Okay, the boundaries of existing reinvestment zone may reduce or be enlarged by the ordinance or the resolution of the governing body of municipality. And you can also extend it. Again, based on the criteria from the previously stated sections. And they refer to section 6 as well, which means that less than 30% of it can be publicly owned property. Are we within that 30% range, considering Packard Channel is publicly owned?
I believe so, but I haven't looked into it myself. So that's something we would look into in this process.
Okay, so I want to make sure that we're within the realm of the existing legislation as to whether or not this gets forwarded on. I mean, TIRZ number 2 has been greatly successful in terms of how much money it makes on an annual basis. And it's not just the city, it's also Del Mar, it's the county, that money could be utilized, back into the general fund, so to speak. But, I mean, these projects still need to go on, like, for example, the monitoring of Packard Channel. I believe you had it for $190,000 per year. There's some maintenance going on, but all that can be brought over to the general fund. Is TIRZ designed for maintenance of projects like this?
From a legal perspective, the TIRZ can be used for maintenance of projects. Whether or not we want to use it or general fund dollars, again, is a council decision. For clarity, currently the contributors to the TIRZ number 2 are the City of Corpus Christi, the Nueces County, and the Nueces County Hospital District. Moving forward, the hospital district is no longer legally allowed to contribute. We could ask Del Mar if they would like to come back in, but they quit contributing in 2009. They quit contributing in 2009. I believe it was 2009.
So it's even doing better than what I thought it was, since we're having an entity that isn't even participating. Okay, well, if we can, I'd like to have a legal opinion as in writing as to where we are within the bounds of the legislation or of Chapter 311.
That's fine.
Of the local code.
That's
tax
fine. I
code.
can put something together for you.
Yeah. We have any other questions?
Thank you.
Anybody in the back?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
the question
Judge
I
Canals.
have is, do you guys anticipate like maybe running an economic analysis? 20 years ago, obviously our baseline was here, right? Now it's clearly higher. If there were to be a discussion that statutorily, fits the TIRZ, and I think that's what Councilman Hernandez is saying, if you pass that test, can you at least sort of bring to light maybe the delta? In other words, you could maybe start a new TIRZ, but it'd be up here now, right? You would capture that increased value so that when you start again, you're really starting at a base level that's more appropriate for 2021 dollars versus $2,000. Is that something that is normally done in this when you're extending past the 20 years?
When you extend it, you keep your current base value. If you let it terminate and create a new one, then you get a new base value. So that happened, like our TIRZ number 1 covered downtown and North Beach. That one expired, so when we did a new one in downtown, we had a new base value. But if you extend the current one,
that's a great answer. That's a good answer, because that's a difference between, with revenue caps, it's a new world for jurisdictions. And so, I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback, but with revenue caps, it's difficult for jurisdictions. And so this might be an alternative, right? Rather than extend, you create a new one if you feel like that's worthy for the geographic areas that are truly undeveloped, so that you could provide this economic tool, but you do so in a way that helps jurisdictions capture their 20 years worth of dollars, right? That incremental value, right, is how your TIRZ got funded. You start at $2021 is what I'm thinking. I'm just thinking that should be at least analyzed to see what the difference would be. It's got to be huge.
Is there a way to do both options? One that provides benefits of extensions versus starting a new one, so we have both sides when you're making that decision, or is that too difficult?
The economic feasibility study we've already done explored extension, because that's what we were looking at the time. I know from the judge's perspective, one of the things is that the county is not going to be locked into 100% again. That's their option. So the different governmental entities can decide how much they want to contribute. The city can as well if we want to contribute 50% moving forward or something instead of 100%.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not locked in, and the county's not locked in to contribute unless they agree to do so in writing. So that would be up to the county to decide.
Okay, so we're fixed with the base, but we are not fixed with the contribution.
That's correct.
Okay.
That would kind of be a compromise where you
Yeah,
could get some of it back.
That's a good point. But it's still, there's still optionality to extend versus to start a new one, which would capture all of the incremental increase in value for ad valorem, for you too. Because you're going to lose the hospital district in Del Mar. So it might be something to think about, is starting, if you want to start, you start with today's values versus 20 years ago's.
Yeah, I will just add, I mean, usually if you're going to extend it, you would normally keep that base value and to then regulate your revenue through the percentage of contribution.
Well, I guess the question you said normally, though, could we adjust the base value?
You could.
Okay, we can adjust the base.
You could, I mean, you could
So that's
dissolve.
Judge Canales'.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
there's sort of the obvious, why would you give a developer in 2021 2020 values? I'm sorry, 2000 values. In other words, the concept is in 2000, you're trying to, the purpose of the TIRZ is economic investment. It's a great tool. I love them. I'm excited about them. I believe the island probably has a lot of areas that could be designated. But I mean, the constraints on government today are very different than they were yesteryear, and 20 years is a tremendous amount of time to lose that delta. You gave it up for the TIRZ to do great projects. You still want great projects to succeed, but to say you're going to go back on 2000 numbers is probably not economically sound. For a developer who's coming in, your TIRZ could be, I mean, we're doing this right now for TIRZ number for 4, right? They got the base value today, because that's the economic incentive, come in today.
And I think Judge Canales that we ought to have staff prepare all of our options
Yeah.
for us, what you're bringing up with it. So we adjust the base percentages so we can take a look at it. And I think your point is a very good point. We have to be thinking in 2021 rather than 2002 when we formed this TIRZ
Yeah.
with it. So, Board Member Pussler?
Has Del Mar dropped out of all the TIRZ? Because I know they were in TIRZ 3. Have they?
No, with TIRZ 3, they extended through the end of the current life of the TIRZ 3, which is 2028, and the North Beach one, I believe they're in for the full life of as well, at the same level as the city is.
Yeah.
They're in for the full term on the North Beach?
And on TIRZ 5 as well. So they're in the others. They're in this one. They had an agreement and it phased out downward, and I believe it ended in 2009, but I may be remembering that year wrong.
For this TIRZ?
For TIRZ number 2.
For TIRZ.
The Del Mar still has a representative on the board, as does Flower Bluff ISD and a few other entities that don't contribute, but they no longer
And
contribute.
by law, the hospital district is phased out.
That's correct. Shortly after TIRZ number 2 was created, the law changed, so the hospital district
Yeah,
is no
because I
longer
know
allowed
when
to
when
participate.
we formed TIRZ 3, they were not allowed to join.
That's correct.
I didn't know where it had
It
changed.
was like 2003, somewhere shortly after this one was created, that law changed.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, obviously, we need to look at all the options here with respect to how we recreate this. This is I just want to say, as an at-large member, and you know this as well as I do, being from the district, the people who live on the island and who do business on the island are very interested in what we do with this TIRZ. And so we need to be sure we get it right, but we need to get all of the options available to the council. The council will have to make this decision on a go-forward basis.
Yeah. Council and the other participating entities. With it. So, okay. Thank you. Okay, no other questions. We'll go to number 6, the status on Packery Channel. I think Tammy was going to zoom in on us with that.
Yes, sir, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Hey, Greg, can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is Brent Chesney. I had my
Oh,
hand raised.
okay.
I was just going to ask, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to clarify back on the discussion on whether to do the contribution change or to go and recreate. I'd also kind of like to know in that analysis, as we're going forward, the difficulty that recreating a new TIRZ is and what has to happen on that, because, and I think Councilman Smith used the word compromise. Maybe the compromise is to extend and to reduce the contribution if that's what the individual bodies want. But I'm a little nervous about not extending, because as Councilman Pusley said, I don't want to send the wrong message to the island and those out there that we are in any way, shape, or form looking at doing anything but continuing this TIRZ in some way, shape, or form that is a positive development tool for the island either. So I would like to know in that analysis how difficult it is to restart the TIRZ and what has to go into all that as part of the analysis on the economic part of that as well, whoever's going to put that together.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we're finance is nodding their head with it on there. So I think we've seen what we're going to be talking about at our next meeting.
Well, and I think the message just needs to be to folks that are listening in that it seems to me, for the most part, the consensus seems to be in some way, shape, or form, we need to have a TIRZ out on the island. I wasn't sure where one person was going on it, but it seems to me that's the consensus, and that's certainly the message that I want to send, is that I'm very interested in continuing in that TIRZ and making sure that we continue to spur development in some way, shape, or form on that island.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Chesney. Member Hernandez.
Yes, I just want to clarify, in terms of my comments, I just want to make sure that we're within the scope of the legislation to ensure that we're following the laws, that this TIRZ can be extended, because we're in a different situation than we were 20 years ago. And as long as that is within that realm, I don't see an issue with going forward. It's just a matter, from what I read in the legislation or in the actual wording, I don't think the island necessarily fits that criteria. And I just want to make sure that we get in writing that we meet that criteria.
Okay.
Okay? Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the Packer Channel.
Good afternoon, or good morning, TIRZ 2 board. This is Tammy Embry. I'm with you from Austin today to give you an update on Packery Channel. This has been a long time coming and a long effort to get there, but we are close with the federal government of coming to achieving the funding we need to move forward with repairs for Packery Channel. I gave you a couple of background documents that were, one is a one-page front and back fact sheet that we used as we were going to Congress last spring to ask for some additional legislative language. And then another is just some frequently asked questions on Packery Channel, and I'll quickly run through this slide deck for you and then give you an update on where we are with funding. Next slide, please. The first slide is the post-Harvey damage photo. Next slide. The next slide is a picture aerial photo taken from Google Earth on January 20th. You can see that we've continued to have deterioration and erosion based on the damage that was incurred during Hurricane Harvey. Next slide. And just for a timeline for where we've been and all the different avenues we've explored for assistance. From August of 2017 to January 2020, there was continuous work by staff to work with FEMA and TDM to assess damage, receive approval to build a more resilient design, and we thought everything was on track. And I will say we went with FEMA because when the channel was damaged during Ike, it was determined that the Corps could not make the repairs because we didn't make the benefit cost ratio for the program that it is eligible, technically eligible to make repairs under. In January 20th, during FEMA final review, it was determined that the Army Corps of Engineers had authority to repair the project through EL 8499, the Flood Control and Coastal Emergency Act. But at the same time, the Corps told the city that although they had technical authority because of the BCR ratio and the fact that it had not been inspected on their end, not ours, it was inactive in their system. So at that point, we worked with our congressional delegation to try to get language in the WRDA bill that was moving at the time. Senator Cruz's office was extremely helpful, as was Congressman Cloud's. And so we sought legislative language to clarify the eligibility for Packery repairs. Next slide. At that same time, we also began a divergent path with FEMA because although only the Corps could repair the channel, FEMA could repair the sidewalks, cables, and bollards, the ancillary items that were built on top of the Corps project. So we have been going through that process as well. June 2020, we also took a third option to seek restore funding for Packery Channel under the erosion program or under the bucket 3, which was designated for Harvey projects, I believe. And we were told that at that time that this project was too big for that bucket. And at the same time, in June 2020, the Army Corps headquarters informed the city congressional delegation that Packery Channel was indeed eligible, and there was a program in the immediately previous WRDA that allowed for projects to buy up their eligibility for the BCR, and that is that is language that had never been used before. And headquarters instructed us to work with the Galveston office to handle the request for assistance, and we have been diligently working with the Galveston office since then. Next slide. There's that. And where we are in current status, we're about 4 steps away from FEMA final review for the supplemental project. Rough estimates at this time, we obviously don't have the final approval and award letter, but FEMA has told us that they will fund approximately $4.3 million for the repairs to the sidewalks, cables, and bollards, with a cost share to the city of approximately $480,000. And the Army Corps of Engineers is currently going through the clearance for the project information report, which is prepared as an answer to our request for assistance. That letter has hit a few snags along the way in the Galveston clearance. Because this is a groundbreaking project, we are still the first project in the nation to use this new authority that will enable us to increase our cost share for the project. Previously, if you didn't meet a benefit cost ratio of 1 or greater, the Corps just said they couldn't do the project. So we would have been totally on our own for funding this project. But because of this, headquarters has been working with the Galveston office on all of the language in the project information report. And because the Galveston office was going to finish their clearance process this week while the colonel was out of the office, they are concurrently tracking the project information report for clearance with the division office, so that their hope is to have all of the division comments incorporated into the document that the colonel signs at the district office, so that when it gets to General Beckett Division, it will move quickly and then on to headquarters. So we're hopeful that in April, we will have a letter back from the district that will give us final estimates of cost share. At that point, once the colonel in Galveston signs the project information report, Galveston is going to go ahead and start work on the project cooperation agreement and start trading drafts with us and our legal department, so that as it's making its way through the clearance process, we're shortening every timetable that we can to expedite this process. It will take, once that project cooperation agreement is signed, we will have a initial cost share due for the engineering design process. And then once the engineering design process is done, we will be responsible for the rest of the cost share of our project before it goes to bid. We expect the engineering design and bid process to take approximately 6 months. And rough estimates is that our cost share will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 to $6 million. But that will all be ironed out on a concrete number once it goes to bid and through the engineering design process. Any questions?
Okay.
But I just want, before you say, I do want to add, we are extremely grateful to the work that the Galveston office has done. They have been over backwards, and they have taken every extra step to get us funding and get the ability for this project. This project was assigned a brand new economist to the Corps that's based somewhere in the Oklahoma or the Midwest, really doesn't know a whole lot about the coast. When this project was initially went through the BCR ratio, it was at a 0. And the Galveston office knew that A&M Corpus Christi had additional data specifically modeling Harvey. And so they sought additional money from headquarters to go and get that data and have it modeled by their environmental staff in Mississippi. And that is the start that got at least some benefit, so that it allowed us to use this new authority in order for the Corps to carry out this project.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Enbridge. So, too quick, you mentioned $480,000 for the FEMA grant, is that correct?
That is approximately the
Okay.
cost share for the FEMA.
And
project.
then $5 to $6 million on the Corps of Engineers.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Edmonds, how much do we estimate that total project cost? We have to do it ourselves.
I believe our estimate is somewhere in the neighborhood of about $15 million.
Okay. And do we have any funds dedicated to that in the TIRZ right now?
Yeah, on the financial, point of information.
No, we don't. But anyway.
There's 4.5 million.
Yeah, we have no, that's not.
The Harvey report,
Yeah,
the Harvey report.
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
it's 4.5 million that we have it for the
For the
Harvey
dredging.
repairs. For the Hurricane Harvey repairs. It's, oh, sorry. Yes, sir, it's on page 11 of your report.
Yeah.
And then we have an additional 4.1 million set aside for dredging.
So we're $2 million.
4.1 for dredging, and
Yeah,
then
but, so how much do we have for,
the Hurricane Harvey, 4.5 million.
okay. And so we're hearing 5 to 6 plus $500,000.
5 to 6, and then plus 4.5 from the TIRZ.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Hernandez?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I was going to ask that question regarding that because in the financial report on page 3, there's $4.5 million for Hurricane Harvey repairs, $4.1 million budgeted for dredging. So that, I mean, I was going to ask, is this amount from FEMA on top of that amount, on top of the amount we already have budgeted, or is it in lieu of?
The amount,
No.
the one that's budgeted can be used for the match for FEMA and the Army Corps.
Okay, no. To what Jeff Edmonds just mentioned, that the total cost was going to be about $15 million, right?
Right.
You got 4.5 budgeted for Hurricane
Correct.
Harvey
From-
repairs, 4.1 for dredging, which I'm assuming is part of that.
No.
So
Just the 4.5, I would
just the
count.
4.5.
Yes, sir.
So dredging is not part of damage done by Hurricane Harvey.
No, that's ongoing maintenance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 4.5, and then you got the 4.3 that's on FEMA. It's a separate amount that's on top of
Right.
this, right?
Right.
And
FEMA
then
was-
our
yep.
contribution would have to be 480,000, so that
Correct.
leaves us short about 5 million,
Right.
roughly 5-6
No,
million.
And then
no, sir, the other cost, he was saying it would have been $15 million if we did the project on our own. So the only cost share that we're going to have, as it's estimated right now, is the 480 from FEMA and the 5 to 6 million from the Corps. The Corps will actually handle this project. They will carry it out. They will bid it. They will do the construction. We are just responsible for our cost share. So the other portion of that project will be absorbed by the Corps.
Okay, so this 4.5 that we have budgeted will come back into the TIRZ?
No,
If-
we're gonna-
If,
No.
if
We
they
need
all
to
pay
use
for
it.
it.
We need to
This
use
would
it.
be on top of
That-
that, so the Corps,
Corps-
FEMA, can you give us like a total amount
Yeah.
of all this? Because, I mean, it's a little confusing.
Sure.
Like,
So-
what's the cost and where is it going to be paid for?
Well, so right now, all we have is an estimate that we did back when we bid the project in late 2019, early 2020. So that was our engineering estimate. So FEMA has done their estimate of putting the walks and ballers and all that stuff back, and that's where that amount came from. So there's actually going to have to be 2 projects to put this back in place. You're going to have to do the revetment. Now, that's going to be done by the Corps of Engineers, and we'll have to put our contribution on deposit with them before they start the project. So that's the match that Tammy was.
That's at $480,000.
No, that was the FEMA
5
part.
to 6.
So
Okay.
we're thinking our match is, 4 to 6 was kind of the range.
Okay, so
for
if
the
we can get a
Corps.
spreadsheet of what we have to do, what they're going to be coming in, what our estimated costs are going to be, and if you can, I don't know if you can update that or
Yeah,
not.
so right now, the error bars are pretty wide on this, so it's just a guess. But what it's looking like right now is you might be $1.5 million short on the match, because we had 4.5 million set aside.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking this is that we just got a discussion on extending the TIRZ, so this would have some component to that. Now, we've got some time before that actually has to happen. So what is your timeline on being able to get that information, get us a more solid number as to what the overall cost is and where the funding needs to come from?
Well, it's a bit of a moving target because the Corps, when they start their process, they're going to start with a preliminary amount. And you put, I don't think you have to put it on deposit until they get ready to start construction. But they'll give you an estimate, and then you have to actually true that up when they get bids.
Okay, and
Jeff, we
timeframe?
will actually have to we will do a small match and, before it goes to engineering and design, and then the balance of our match will be due before it goes to bid. And that will be laid out in the award letter, or in the letter that we get after they complete the project information report, which is making its way through the clearance process as I described earlier.
And Tammy, do you have any idea, did you mention 6 months on that?
6 months between, once we have the letter back from the Corps, which we expect in April, it will take about 6 months until, to go through the engineering, design, and bid process. So between now and the fall.
They're saying they're going to reutilize our design to a large extent,
Yeah.
which I think is going to help accelerate the project.
But McGill, they never hit a timeline yet.
Well, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I'm listening, I'm hearing 6 months,
Yeah.
roughly.
Yeah.
But also, if we could just get that kind of a spreadsheet as to where money's supposed to come from and how it's supposed to be paid for. And I know you're just ballparking the cost, that's fine. I just want to kind of have an idea of where money's coming and going from. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Member Puzzle?
Yeah, so Jeff, has FEMA already started making repairs?
No, sir.
Okay, so there has been no construction.
No, so what happened,
We're-
FEMA came in right after Hurricane Harvey, and they
Right.
started doing damage assessments. We were having regular meetings. City was moving forward with the understanding that we would let this contract, and we would be reimbursed by FEMA at their normal
Right.
80/20 or 90/10 cost share. And that's when we budgeted money, because we knew we were going to have expenses in there. And we just could not get an answer out of FEMA. We never got the project, they call it a project worksheet. We never could get that approved. And so in order to try and pressure them, we actually let the contract, we advertised for bids. And fortunately, we didn't get any bids, and so we were going to have to re-advertise. But about that time, they came in and they brought up this fact that the Corps of Engineers had authority, and so therefore that relieved FEMA from funding this under the public assistance
So
program.
the stopgap measures that, I've been out to look at the damage a couple of times, and obviously there's been some stopgap stuff going on, putting up barriers and whatnot. That's the city doing that. FEMA's not been out there
No, sir,
doing
they're
anything.
not, FEMA's not
Okay.
engaged in any way,
So,
shape, or form.
if I understand Tammy correctly, when we get the final bids or whatever, FEMA will put together all of that information on their part, Corps of Engineers will do it on their part, and then they're gonna let us know some number that we'll have to match. And right now, as it stands, we have $4.5 million in the Harvey repairs. We have 4.1 million budgeted for dredging, but we could move some of that dredging monies over to cover the overage. Other than that, the TIRZ would have to do some bonded indebtedness to cover that expense. And as Councilman Hernandez pointed out, bonded indebtedness would be one of the ways that, you would extend the TIRZ if you needed to. So,
I will let the finance folks talk about where the money will have to be moved around from. From the logistics standpoint, the Corps will have to complete their work before the FEMA work can start. And that's because you can't build a sidewalk on air.
I understand.
It's part of that whole thing of why it was so confusing when they said they could do the sidewalks, but they couldn't do the channel because you couldn't build sidewalks, where there wasn't a channel.
No, I'm not in the construction phase yet, Tammy. I'm just making generalities.
Yeah,
Well, there is one clarification.
We are
I'd like-
about 3 steps away from the final award letter and what will be finally in writing from FEMA.
But the city will not be in charge of the construction of those projects.
No,
That will be-
let me clarify that. There's just so a little bit of confusion. So with the Corps project, when the Corps takes it over and federalizes the project, they run the project.
Yes,
All we do is give them money.
correct.
And they run it. FEMA's quite the opposite. You run it and FEMA reimburses you, you
Okay.
hope. But all you get is an approved project worksheet. You go do the work. You're expecting to get some funds back from FEMA at some point. It's a reimbursement program. So what we'll have to do is fix the revetment, then we'll have to let a contract to make the other.
But the bottom
choices.
line is our matching funds will come from these two buckets, I'm assuming. And
Yes, sir.
Heather's standing behind you with an exasperated look on her face. She's going to correct me if
The
I'm...
great thing about mask, you can't see that.
I understand. I can see it in your eyes, Heather.
So depending on what the match ends up being on the total cost of the project, we do have available fund balance within the TIRZ.
Okay.
And so, we have several $1 million. It was budgeted at 4.7 million. Of that, 2 million is reserved. So that would leave about $2.7 million that we could pull out of fund balance. And that's just for the fiscal year 21. Depending on what our debt service requirements are for 22,
Is that
there
over
may
and
be
above the
additional.
4.5 and the 4.1?
Yes, that is. That's on the operating side. That 4.5 and the 4.1 has already been moved to the CIP account, so that is not reflected in that top level
So unless the
financial.
numbers get wild, we should be covered. I mean,
Yes, exactly.
We
So
may have to dip into our dredging fund a little bit.
exactly.
Well, I would be very cautious about that because the dredge is completely
You're
independent.
going to have to dredge it once they get finished.
Well, it's shoaling. We might need to dredge it before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there is, unless the numbers come in substantially higher than what the initial estimates were, then, and we do have the sufficient fund balance, so I don't think that we would have to be issuing bonds to cover that additional monies.
Okay. All right. Very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Judge, can I?
In addition, we might want to explore America Rescue Act most likely could cover this infrastructure project, and you wouldn't have to take from your cash reserves at all. And really, that is exactly what these dollars are designed to do, help local jurisdictions meet their infrastructure needs without burdening, they're already burdened, bottom line. I think I read it, I'm still, trying to decipher what is exactly, a water project, a sewer project, right? But I think this would qualify. And I think it's something that we should have our disaster recovery folks look at, and how wonderful it would be to know that you wouldn't have to worry about where the money source would come from at all. You would just have to appropriate it.
Great, thank you. That's brand new though, so we've got a lot of understanding to do with it.
Right. And perhaps the county could partake in that as a partner.
Mm-hmm. I think staff is smiling on that one. Thank you, Judge Canales.
Well, I mean, it's a lot of money coming your way, over 60 million, over 70 million to the
Almost
county.
70. Okay.
I'm certain that we all have our thoughts about where that infrastructure should be spent. But again, Packery Channel is the gateway to the Gulf of Mexico. This is a project that's waited for 4 years to get fixed. Perhaps this is exactly where we should be looking.
Yeah.
And then the TIRZ stays as healthy as possible. I wouldn't go bond when the money's coming our way.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Okay, next item of business is going to be a briefing on the Park Road 22 bridge. Make it quick, Jeff. You've got about 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm Jeff Edmonds, Director of Engineering Services, and we manage all the capital projects on behalf of the city. I'm going to turn the floor over to Brett Van Hazel. He's one of our assistant directors. He leads our construction management division. You probably noticed we've got construction going on pretty much everywhere you go in city, and that's Brett's fault. No, seriously, it's a big job, and Brett's doing a great job. We've got about 52 active construction contracts right now with a total value of $350 million, and Park Road 22 is just one of those. And he's joining us today on the WebEx, and I'm going to turn the floor over to Brett.
Okay, now you got a minute, Brett.
Okay, all right. Good morning, Chairman and Board. Next slide, please. So, some of you know the history, but just real quick. So back, a couple years ago, Diamond Beach Holdings and Padre Island Holdings approached the city about the canal. And in 2019, the TIRZ Board, number 2, along with the North Padre Island Development Corporation City Council, approved to appropriate $4 million out of TIRZ 2 funds. And then later in 2019, we actually formalized the agreement to proceed. Next slide. So some of the project details. This is a bond 2014 project, and the project consists of converting the existing road system into a bridge to allow the canal coming from the west side development to connect to the east side. It'll include relocation of existing utilities, ground stabilization, drainage facilities, erosion control, etc. The total project amount is $13.9 million, and we did start construction October of last year. On the right-hand side, that picture you see is and many of you may have seen these pieces of equipment out there, but they're actually putting in geo-piers into the ground. We've got a little over 2,000 of them that need to be installed. Next slide. So the first phase of construction is on the northbound lanes. Most of you know we've already switched traffic over, and we've been working on the northbound lanes for the past 5 months. We have completed all the ground stabilization, geo-pier installation on the northbound line side. We finished all the utility adjustments, and we just, as of yesterday, finished all of the drilled shaft installation, which is referenced at the bottom, that we had 18 at the time of this presentation. And on the right-hand side, you could actually see some of those drilled shafts. Next slide, please. So for phase one, we have started doing the sheet pile installation along the bridge revetment, and we're going to start doing the bridge installation in April of this year. In August, we'll actually start the roadway installation, and then October of this year, we will transition our work from the northbound lanes to the southbound lanes, so there will be a traffic switch. And then once we move over to the southbound lanes, we will start over with the ground improvements, and the process will continue until October of 2022, when we will be complete with the bridge. And we are currently on schedule, even though we've had some impact with weather. And next slide. And that's it. Any questions?
Chairman, can I just have Brett explain what those geo-pilings are so the council knows? It's 2,000 of them. And then also, Brett, we're on budget and on schedule, right? Just to repeat that.
Yes, sir. We are on schedule and on budget.
Okay. Can you just,
the geo-piers are part of the ground stabilization. So on either side of the bridge, we've put approximately 1,200, give or take, geo-piers in the ground to help stabilize it, to ensure that we don't have any soil degradation or movement on either side of the bridge. So it's just part of that stabilization process.
Okay. Thank you, Brent. Member Hernandez?
Excuse me. Thank you, Chairman. On the 13.9 million, is that just for construction, or does that include the wastewater lift station that needed to be put in there as well as design? Is that all encompassing, or is there more cost?
The 13.9 million is only the construction for Park Road 22 bridge. The Park Road 22 lift station and force main project is separate.
Okay, so because we had to have that lift station to go over the bridge, correct?
Actually, sir, we have an existing force main that runs through what will be the new channel. So once we get the new lift station installed, we will actually remove the existing force main so that we can complete the channel work on the southbound lanes.
Okay, so...
And that project is... I'm sorry, Councilman. I was just going to say that force main project and lift station project will be completed later this year, ahead of when we actually make that transition.
Okay, so if you can include those costs as well as part of this, so we understand the full cost of it, in future briefings, as well as design cost. Thank you.
And thank you. And Councilman Hernandez, you need to consider that the lift station does bring in an additional area, the Lake Padre area. So there's more to the lift station than just the bridge. The lift station will be needed with or without the bridge.
Yeah, just looking at cost. Thank you.
Board Member Puzzle?
Yes, and whoever wants to answer that. And I'm just trying to catch up because I wasn't here when this was done. The bond 2004, was that done by the TIRZ, or was that just a regular city bond?
That was a regular city bond, but the project as it was conceived back then was just culverts.
Okay.
So over time, the project scope has increased to provide.
So is any of the money to pay for this project coming from the TIRZ?
Yes, sir. It's, what was the number, 4 million?
$5.9 million.
I have a question.
Okay.
So with
Dr.
So-
Turner?
with them tearing down the water park, is that gonna impact this project?
No. To expand on that, one of our, when we awarded the contract, we required that the canal be built on there, so the canal is built with it. So the water park has nothing to do with that. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry.
Anyway, so in the financial report that we received this morning, I'm trying to see where the expenditures for this project are included. Is that just part of the debt, or?
So no, the project, the funding has already been moved from the operating portion of the TIRZ over into the CIP portion. So that's on that second or third page of the financial report. It shows a remaining balance of the $5.6 million for Park Road 22. And so those are cash funds that were transferred. That's not part of the debt at all. That's not debt. Those are cash funds that were transferred from the operating TIRZ fund into the CIP fund.
Okay, so the 5.6 million is going to go for completing this project?
Exactly.
And that's on top of the 13 million, or is that part of the 13?
I believe that is part of the 13 million. The total project is 13 million. Of that, the TIRZ is
Paying
funding a
5
portion of it, yes.
Okay, all right, I'm up to speed. Thank you.
Any other questions? Anybody out in the hinterland? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Next item of business is identify future agenda items. This is what it says on our public notice. So, Board Member Pusley, do you have any future agenda items you'd like to identify?
Would you like me to cause more trouble for this meeting, or
No,
you
no, thank you.
want to adjourn now?
Enough said. Okay. Hearing no other business at 11:05, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.